afternoon, and thank you for making it to the end of the day. Genuinely, we've had some fantastic feedback. Really enjoyed it. Had some amazing speakers, and as always, we'd love to hear from you guys. But it hasn't finished, so we're going to go out with a bang. For those of you that have been in all day, you may have been involved in one or two of the debates that took place this morning, the great media debate, where we had two different groups that were debating the 10 topics that we'd either written about the most over the past 12 months in the Media Leader or spoken about at the events on these stages. The two groups came down to three subjects that they wanted the Media Leader to champion, and we had a room of future media leaders, we had a room of current media leaders, and now we're going to finish with the people that really know, that have been there, done it, and got the T-shirt. I'm going to welcome Omar Oakes, editor of the Media Leader, up to the stage with his panel. He will introduce them, and we will get on and find out what are going to be the three topics that we debate in 2023 on behalf of the industry. So please give Omar and his panel a warm welcome.
After you. Thank you very much, Steve. And indeed, what a day it's been. And it feels, I can't believe it was just this morning that we had these two debates, because so much has happened since. Time has gone really quickly. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited about this, because we are going to put forward three things the media leader is going to champion next year. And with me to help us do this, we have Jan Gooding. As you'll know, if you read the Media Leader, Jan is one of our regular columnists. She's worked at advertising giants such as Aviva, British Gas, BT, all household names, and is now an executive coach. What have you been doing the last couple of years behind the scenes? How are you executive coaching? What's all that about?
Oh my goodness, what an enormous question. I went to Henley Business School to study how to be a coach because I wanted to be a better non-exec. And they make you do lots of practice. You have to accumulate hours like a pilot. And I really enjoyed it. So I now coach about 20 people over the course of a year, senior directors.
Anyone in the media industry who's getting coaching?
Yes, but they're all confidential. I hope I'm part of their secret armoury for success.
Okay. Also, one of our regular columnists is Nick Manning on the far end. Nick Manning, of course, is the co-founder of Manning Gottlieb OMD, the Omnicom media agency, and is now Encyclomedia. You founded Encyclomedia. Just explain briefly what that is.
It's a one-man consulting business, me. And my role these days is really working with advertisers or advertiser associations to try and help advertisers do media better. And that's my single focus. I occasionally do a little bit of work with media owners, but most of it is just helping advertisers navigate their way through this complex maze that we've got today.
Good, okay. And not a columnist to my immediate left is Mick Buckley, who used to run CNBC in EMEA. What was that like?
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, really, really good. In fact, they're probably wondering what a guy who runs a football club is doing sitting up here. But no, I spent 25 years in the media industry. I spent 8 years running international media companies. And then a little bit like Jan, actually, I went to the other business school. I went to Ashridge and retrained to be a coach. And so for the last, I found today very interesting because I coach some people in the media industry, but I also coach in other industries as well. So it's been great to almost come back to the media industry and look at what the issues are now versus what they used to be.
So you're a football coach as well?
I coach football coaches.
Oh, there you are.
So yes, I spend my time coaching people across different industries, and I chair AFC Wimbledon.
Great club I know very well in a previous life as a local newspaper reporter for the Wimbledon Guardian. Right, so we've got a lot to get through today. So if you've been watching the debates we had this morning, we had one session with senior industry people and one with rising stars, future leaders, and the results were very interesting. Each session was asked to put through 3 issues that the media leader should champion in 2023, based on what the most important issues going on in the media industry right now. And in my session, the top issues were trust in media, talent crisis, D&I. We got a slide to... Oh, I was supposed to use a clicker. My apologies. I'm in control now. Here we go. Can everyone see, or do we just move people? Is that okay? So, diversity and inclusion, number 1. Trust in media and sustainability was on the future leaders on the left. Diversity and inclusion, trust in media and sustainability. And in the panel I chaired with senior leaders, inflation, cost of living, trust in media, and talent crisis in D&I. So, obviously trust in media is in both, which is a clue to what might happen with that particular topic. We are going to, the job we have right now is to get 3 out of those 5. So, what we're going to do now, we're going to have a vote. We're going to see what the room thinks without any talking, just to see where your heads are at. We're going to talk about these issues, and then we're going to vote again and see where we land. Sound good? All right. So, time for Slido. Hopefully you can use that QR code. I want you all to vote. Talent crisis, cost of living, diversity and inclusion, sustainability. What is the most important issue we must tackle as an industry? We're going to talk about trust in media just a second. Spoiler alert, we're going to put that one through. Interesting.
It's neck and neck.
Don't look as you vote. Be strong. Don't be influenced by the room. And I'll just mention, on my session, if anyone in this room, you'll have seen this, the results we had from the first vote and the second vote were very different indeed. Where cost of living wasn't even in the top 3, and then after the debate it shot up there, and it was actually about 40% of the audience said that we should put that one through. So this is interesting. Right, we're going to talk about trust in media first, which is the one that went through. Trust in media came second out of the 3 in each session, and it also came top of the reader poll that we had earlier this week. Sam Tidmarsh, you chaired the Future Leaders one. Do you want to give a recap on, just for the benefit of whoever wasn't in that session, how that shaked out and why it was that diversity and inclusion actually came top of that one as well, in the session you chaired? Do you need a microphone? Or can you shout really loudly? Sam on the stage, everyone.
Always just getting back on stage, aren't I? However I can, however I will. Yeah, look, they were really certain on their answers, actually. Throughout the entire debate, we really pushed and argued different perspectives, and I think anybody who was in that room at the time seen we covered almost every single one of those issues of the initial 10 we put forward, but it was clear what came out on top. And you know, diversity and inclusion was one of the ones we chose, and actually that started out in fifth, but rocketed up in the places after a pretty impassioned plea from Chris Kenner, who's the founder of Brand Advance, the inclusive media planning agency, and so that shot up right to the top. And so on the second round we had to put that one forward, and we were really happy to do so. Sustainability was something the panel also picked out. It was the top on the round 1 vote and third in round 2, so it's clearly one of our top 3. And the final one, trust in media, we spent quite a while on the debate about this one, because I think it's one of these issues that is really concerning to the future leaders of our industry, and the way we go forward and build on the future. And given where we were at in 2018, where the Credos report said 25% of the industry, of public had trust in our industry, we really want to see that rise. So our top 3 were diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and trust in media.
Very interesting. And funnily enough, trust in media was consistently ranked high in R1, even though we didn't actually talk about it that much. So I want to take a little bit of time. If we're going to put through trust in media as something the media leaders should champion next year as a focus, I think we need to be careful about how we define that. Does anyone have a view on what exactly trust in media should look like? There's an awful lot of media out there,
Yeah.
and all of it's the same. Mick, what do you
Yeah,
think?
so I mean, it can mean lots of different things. It can mean trust in media brands, it can mean trust in journalists, it can mean trust in advertisers, the environment in which they place their ads.
So what's the most
So-
problematic area
Well,
of
I
trust
think-
you think that we should be looking
Well,
at?
I think from my experience, so I oversaw a newsroom and a commercial operation that worked together when I was running an international news channel. So one day we would be doing an expose on Barclays, you know, mistreatment of accounts or whatever. The next day I'll be in there trying to sell them some advertising.
Which
So
one's ever does. Yeah.
it was always understood, you know, trust was our currency. So it was understood by all of our stakeholders that we were looking for balance, that we were looking for, you know, an equal point of view. And you know, to be honest with you, we lived in fear of Ofcom coming in and saying that we were unbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
So now what I observe is trust means different things to different people. So in the US, millions of people trust Fox News, and advertisers trust Fox News to the extent of about $600 million a year. So there's trust there, and what you kind of see are media owners who are either leading or following the kind of polarization that's happening in society with a view to kind of maximizing their profits. So I don't think I don't get a sense anyone is necessarily complaining about trust in media. It seems to be something that they're more concerned
Well,
about.
our audience.
Are they complaining, or are they observing? Or I mean, what I would say is agencies and clients shouldn't be complaining if they are trusting brands that don't seem that trustworthy with their investment.
Okay. Jan Gooding, what do you think trust in media? How do we define the way that we should champion that?
I used to work in insurance, and it was always really embarrassing when Edelman used to do their trust barometer, and insurance companies were trusted less than politicians, which was a pretty embarrassing place to be. And I think that it's probably true that media has never been really trusted, because
Really?
clearly, yes, there's always been a vested interest. You know, they would say that, wouldn't they? And just like a brand, when it's advertising, would say that, wouldn't they? I have changed my view on this, because when I worked as a brand director, I used to really be concerned to separate the idea of influencing editorial. So this, people have referred to it today as the church and state thing. And so the idea of not advertising in a medium because it was not trustworthy was something I didn't want to get involved in, because the way I used to think about it was, I'm not going to, you know, I'm perfectly happy to sell Aviva insurance to the reader or the consumer of any media. So why would I discriminate? So unless I'm going to say I won't serve a Daily Mail consumer, why would I not try and reach them through their preferred media? And I have changed my view, and I have changed that because of the harm I have seen done by social media organisations and their reluctance to engage in the harm that is caused. I am deeply concerned about the hate speech that we now see commonplace, which we know drives currencies like clicks and views. And I mean, unfortunately, it's a bit like a car accident. People like to look at things that are a bit unpleasant. We're all drawn to an argument in a pub. You can't look away. And so I have actually changed my view. I used to argue that we would not look at our media schedule as Aviva on the basis of the quality of journalism and the quality of content and the extent of truthfulness. I actually think if I was now running Aviva, I would have a very strong view on what I felt was trustworthy, as in good journalism, content that was moderated and not just out there like the Wild West. So I think to earn trust, you know, to not be trusted is because you've done something. So how do we become more trustworthy, I think, is the question, and interesting and difficult for the media leader to consider. So what is the thing you need to champion that's the most important thing that would demonstrate media is trustworthy, and that they actually do things that cost them money, they have values and principles, and they're on your side because they do not want to harm you.
Nick Manning, this sounds like from the discussion we're having now that essentially we're needing to put forward values in terms of what good content looks like versus bad content. Doesn't that lead us down to a potentially dangerous path?
Well, I think advertisers, I'm absolutely with Jen on it, I think advertisers have to take a point of view and a stand on what constitutes the right environment for them. And I think they have to be very selective about where they advertise these days, because there are a lot of elephant traps and places they shouldn't want to go. And if I go back to the title of this, what are the three most important issues we must tackle as an industry? The reality is it's not an industry, it's two industries. It's the media industry and it's the advertising industry. And they've always been symbiotic and joined at the hip. And it always worked because there was a mutual dependency that was a very beneficial one. And it worked very well, but we're not seeing that anymore. We're not seeing the same level of symbiosis between a healthy media industry and a healthy advertising industry. Social media is a big reason for that. And a couple of years back, I did some work for the Advertising Association, some consulting work, because all of their curves on Credos are down, saying trust in media, way down, trust in advertising goes almost as a parallel. It's as though the public basically goes, I don't trust the media, therefore I don't trust the advertising in the media. So we're all being dragged down. In fact, we're below estate agents now, according to the latest stuff.
Even worse than insurance.
Even worse than insurance and politicians. Actually, no, I think politicians are... anyway, whatever. So, we've got a collective problem as an industry. We need a healthy media ecosystem to advertise in. And the media owners rely on us to spend money there. So we've got to collectively link arms and say, how do we restore trust in the media and trust in advertising at the same time? And after 2 years of doing that work, we came up with a number of solutions, but it does require, the word collaboration is a very easy word to use, but you've got to get the whole industry on side. That includes the big digital platforms. And I'm not entirely sure they are on side. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're not on side. And until they decide that they want to take part in this conversation, it's going to be very, very hard, given their dominance in the media industry.
Okay. I want to move on to what we're going to eliminate from this list. We're putting through trust in media. But before we do that, does anyone in the audience have an observation on what we've just been talking about before we move on? We've got two at the back there.
Thank you. Richard Brooke, Unilever. My only thought is we have to be very careful to pull apart media channels which are reputable, verified, who have a point of view we might not agree with, and media channels that we shouldn't necessarily trust, if you see what I mean.
And there was one there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you want trust in media, what about regulation? Just level up the regulation, get rid of sedition and libel, which just makes money and never gets punished.
Well, the problem that we've got is that we have some parts of the media which are regulated, although too lightly in my view in some instances, and some which are completely unregulated. And the trouble is they get bracketed together in people's minds. So we've got a two-track system, and the regulation where it works very well, but in unregulated media, i.e. the internet, it doesn't work at all. And self-regulation by companies like Meta hasn't worked, because to actually monitor and regulate the whole of Facebook, the whole of Instagram, and by the way, WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was heavily referenced in the what was the girl? Sorry, I lost her name.
Molly Russell.
The Molly Russell case. So they've got to monitor 3 enormous platforms worldwide. It's impossible to do. So in the absence of self-regulation, there has to be external regulation.
Okay. Let's move on. We're going to put through 2 out of these 4. Cost of living / inflation, diversity and inclusion, sustainability, talent crisis. I'm going to come to cost of living last, because that was top of the senior panel we had this morning, and it's come top of your poll just now. So let's go to the bottom one, talent crisis. Does anyone want to make the case on the panel, first of all, for talent crisis, why the media leader needs to be challenging the talent crisis?
It's almost, I can't believe it's sitting there at the bottom, because it's almost so obvious and so important that...
Why?
Because it's us, because it's the people who work in the industry. If we do not mind about the knowledge, the skill, the intelligence, the ability, the capability of the people who work in the industry, then we're definitely dead. And I'm interested that it's described as a crisis. I know there was the Great Resignation, there's been a huge change in flexible working, but if it really is a crisis, it should be at the top. If we've got a crisis about our talent, we have to start there. It would be my number one priority. And if I was going to focus, the thing that I would want the media leader to champion is the hugely neglected, hugely overworked middle management who have been absolutely exhausted and dealing with everything that's thrown at them. I have written, you kindly mentioned this morning, I've written before about my horror that whenever there is cost cutting, it's always taken out of the middle. We are addicted to young, cheap, inexperienced, unskilled. We call it talent, but eager young people who come into the business. And we expect each new flow of new generation to solve all our problems, to make our cultures more inclusive, to be more diverse, to help reduce our costs. But the middle managers have to manage all this. But they're the people we always get rid of. We've stopped training them properly. We don't manage their workload. We publish salaries. We don't publish bonuses. And I'm deeply suspicious of the salary structures that are within all our organisations and what's really going on. I don't think there are enough middle managers. I don't think enough is spent on their training and development. And that's the talent we should be worrying about, the 35 to 50-year-olds, the middle income, that are the engine room of creating all of our value.
So lots of clapping, thank you very much. Does anyone want to comment on that or add to that? Ella, Sagar,
Okay, I just sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to wait for the mic, but you go first and then Ella behind you, if that's all right.
I was just going to agree with Jan in that, to me, the talent crisis, or without the talent in the industry, you can't solve any of the others.
Yeah.
I mean, diversity and inclusion feels mocked up with talent. You know, we need more diverse opinions to be able to do our jobs better and market to the people we're trying to represent. And without the right talent, you can't solve sustainability or inflation or cost of living. You can't do any of the above if you don't have the right people in the room trying to tackle those issues. How can we tackle those issues properly if we don't have the talent to do it?
But you have to have the right people in the room, absolutely, but they need to be well-trained, well-motivated, well-remunerated, encouraged, and all those things. And the reality is that over quite a long time, the advertising industry has not kept pace with other industries in terms of its investment in its workforce.
Yeah.
And there's data to support that. That's not just my opinion. And I think about starting salaries for graduates in media agencies now. It's not a lot more than it was 10 years ago. They have other choices. Now, okay, not everybody can start at Freshfields on £100,000 a year as a graduate because you have to have a law conversion or whatever, but you can go to Google for 40 or 50 grand. You can go and do lots of other things in fintech on a lot more money. So, it's not as though there's a lot of people out there wanting to come into the industry and earn less for the sake of working in advertising. It's not like it used to be in the good old days. So, yes, we need volume of people, but we also need to have the right salary structures and so on.
Would that not be encompassed in the talent crisis in terms of
It is.
not just about recruiting the right people, but as you say,
Well,
training them,
yeah.
keeping them,
Yeah.
developing them, moving them young, fresh blood into the middle management, helping them manage that,
Yeah.
and moving them up. It's sort of talent to me seems quite encompassing in terms of not
Yeah.
just recruitment, but actually nurturing,
All those things.
maintaining,
All those things, yeah.
establishing actual true talent.
Yeah, and
And
if you look at why this has happened in the advertising industry, there's two key reasons. One is, and I don't want to get my high horse here, but I will. Basically, the demand side, if you like, the agency side, is dominated by the big groups. They are under huge pressure the whole time on many dimensions: margin, growth in profit, profitability, salary and related, and so on and so forth. And when you're trying to run a big agency and you've got all those constraints upon you, it's very difficult to raise your salaries, to invest in training and so on and so forth. So the domination of the big groups has been an issue in the media agency world. On the media owner side, because it's been so dominated by Google, Facebook, and the other platforms, it means that the amount of revenue flowing into the rest of the media industry has also been restrained, and that limits their ability to reinvest in their people. So those two tectonic plates, if you like, have been one of the key reasons why the advertising industry has not kept up with other industries in terms of its ability to do all the things you've just been talking about.
Okay, you make a strong case. Before we move on, I want to bring in Ella.
Hi, Ella Sagar, the media leader. I just wanted to to springboard off this. I did an interview with Ali Owen, who's the founder of Brixton Finishing School recently, and she was saying there isn't really a talent crisis, it's just that you reach a peak in media at 34, and after that you just kind of become, no one really wants to listen to what you say, in her words. And so I wonder if, off of your point, Jan, that it's getting all of the young talent in isn't really the issue, isn't it just making sure that there is a way forward for people of all ages, because ageism is the last acceptable ism in media?
I think that's... so I don't think there's a talent crisis. I think there's a cultural crisis in our industry, actually.
So more related to D&I, if we have to bucket that.
Yeah, D&I is definitely part of it. I think it's we're generating, as Nick says, billions of profits from the various companies on the different sides of the industry. We're not prioritizing creating an environment where we recruit the best high potential talent and give them the environment to be nurtured, to grow, develop. And it needn't be young talent. I love the point you just made. At AFC Wimbledon, which is a company that breaks even, everything is geared towards finding people, bringing them in. Because there are no profits, we need to kind of create an environment where people want to be there, want to develop, and move on. We sell them. We sell the players for lots of money. The groundsman, just this year we brought in a groundsman from a park who's now working at Craven Cottage as the head groundsman.
Good.
Our physio. So everything we do is about the story, the environment is about the story of the club. It's about the values of the club. It's about the fact that if they want to, they can go and deliver food parcels at lunchtime into the community. So we have created an environment, and it's related to cost of living. You're not paid that much money in football, so some of our staff are struggling actually to get to work.
That's an interesting point, because AFC Wimbledon is in London. Lots of media companies are based in London. I worry so much when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and the talent crisis. We maybe tend to focus on the struggles of agencies, but what about media owners as well? I mean, media is notorious for being too white, too male, too middle class, too London. I mean, shouldn't that be a priority if we're supposed to be talking to the whole of the country? We need to actually get serious about...
the most telling moment that I've experienced today was in the other room when someone said, look around this room, and there was a collective embarrassment. I think 13% of over 16s in this country are ethnically diverse. In London, I think it's 40% plus. Their consumer spending is £300 billion, according to one piece of research. 40% of our icons in this country, be they sporting, be they artists, be they fashion, are from the ethnic communities. And we're not doing enough. And actually, having worked in 2 international companies where naturally there was a lot more diversity, it was really fun. You get people who are different to you, and you're kind of discussing different ideas, different experiences. It's amazing. So we should really be striving.
So why aren't media companies doing it then?
I'm sort of disappointed. I don't know. I mean, we had a conversation earlier on about
sorry to press you, but if you could go back to your time at CNBC, what would you have done differently?
Well, it was very diverse from a gender and a ethnicity point of view. And the point being, because it was an international business, it seemed to attract more people. And it made it more creative. We made decisions differently. So, there's lots of research that shows that diverse companies and boards are more effective. And I've seen that. They absolutely are. And it's, at the end of the day, we're here to live a life, right? It's a holistic thing. It's not just about 9 to 5 and go to work. We're here to have experiences, and you will have a better experience in a diverse workplace. So we should be working harder. It's about what we're prioritising. It's environment and what we prioritise.
Can I just say, when
briefly,
we're
Jen.
talking about talent, I think we are talking across the generations. It's not just about the youth. I think people's potential to learn, develop, progress is a lifelong thing. And I think we've got to stop just looking at the recruitment end of people entering the business and think about the skills and experience. We are about to face the highest levels of interest rates, inflation, in bizarrely a state of full employment. We have a completely bizarre government. Sorry if anybody is into the current regime, but
raise your hands.
Well,
No.
they really frighten me. But what I can tell you, I am 63, and I tell people that I'm 63 all the time. I am at the start of the 4th chapter of my working life. I feel I have plenty still to offer, and the biggest group who are leaving in the Great Resignation are the 50 plus. So you're losing all that experience, all that resilience, all that knowledge is being lost at a time when young people under 35, they've never experienced anything like these conditions. And so we've got to be more imaginative about, when we talk about representation, we've got to talk about every generation being represented in all our organisations, and we've got to talk about class. It's always because it's not a protected characteristic yet in the Equality Act, we never talk about class in this country, and it's an absolutely massive issue. And it's not just about going so we don't have Oxbridge. Lots of people who are socially mobile go to Oxbridge now. If we start discriminating against Oxford and Cambridge, we are accidentally excluding people who have come, from very difficult backgrounds. So we've got to be intelligent about what we mean by talent, and that is us. And we are not going to solve these problems if we don't have diverse experience and skills in the room.
Okay. All right, we've talked a lot about diversity inclusion, we've talked a lot about talent crisis, really interesting. We've touched on cost of living inflation, which was your number one issue. We've not talked about sustainability. I submit to you, what could be more important than the planet? Whose responsibility I'll start that again. When we're trying to champion sustainability, where should our focus be? Should it be on talking to the advertisers and saying, how are you, throughout your whole supply chain, how are you holding your agencies and your other vendors to account in terms of cutting carbon footprints? Or should we be asking more questions of the agencies, asking perhaps their clients, how are you cutting carbon footprint? Where is the accountability? How do we measure and towards more sustainability?
Well, let me have a go at that, because I think this is the hardest one of all, because different people will have different definitions of this. But one thing that I have observed is that the media agencies are trying hard now to look at the carbon footprint of their planning in particular, to say this is a carbon neutral plan, and that's a good thing. What they don't do, though, is make sure that then applies to all of their trading activities as well. So once it's gone past the planning stage, it's out in the open, and programmatic advertising in particular can be extremely non-carbon neutral. So I think there's an element of this is to actually put your money where your mouth is and see it through the entire chain. Isn't going to save the world per se, but we've got to make our contributions. So I think it's about proper commitment to making sure that everything that your operation does meets your objectives in terms of sustainability and an approach to the carbon footprint.
And does that mean that in the interest of transparency, accountability, we should be calling on more information to be coming out of when public companies reporting quarterly earnings, carbon numbers, for example? What ideas do you have for what we should be pushing for?
I don't think we can talk about sustainability without being prepared to sacrifice. There was a point very well made in the room we were just in. What are you prepared to give up? And I was very struck. So again, if I was going to go for one thing, I was struck by the embarrassment of Cannes and the simple request that we stop marketing fossil fuels. If we can't even do that what the fuck is a carbon calculator going to do?
Or airlines, for that matter.
Well, then you can go to airlines. We have to get real, people. I mean, we're at 30 seconds to midnight. This summer was very frightening. At my age, I am starting to wonder if this planet is even going to see me out. I used to say, oh, I'm worried for my grandchildren, which I don't have yet, sadly. My sons are not here, so I can express my hope to you, but I never dare say anything to them. But honestly, you know, we have to start doing things that matter now, this year. I want the market leader. Who are these agencies who are working for fossil fuel brands and not declaring it in their client list that I read about earlier? This really matters, and if we cannot even do that, if we're waiting for a regulator or a government to act, we are going to be dead.
Thank you, and please, if you have any comments, do raise your hands. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we've got a question already at the back there, unless were you scratching something? No, you.
I mean, I may have been scratching something, but I was also putting my hand up.
Good auction.
It just strikes me that the sort of cost of living crisis, or maybe paying people a fair wage, touches into every single one of the other categories. You're going to really struggle to attract a diverse or inclusive audience because they're going to be disproportionately poorer, so they're not going to be able to chance a job in advertising. Sustainability will go down the list of priorities as agencies' margins are kind of really affected. And it touches into the talent crisis. You're not going to be able to attract people from outside of London because, you know, most of the people in this room are fairly well remunerated, but I can tell you, most people in this industry struggle to afford to live in London, where, let's face it, the vast majority of media companies are based. So I know we've debated the respective merits of each category, and they're all so important, but I think cost of living crisis just strides it as the issue of our age for what it's worth.
That is an extremely good point, and as somebody said in the room this morning, it's the only one that's consumer-facing out of all of these, because the people we're advertising to is the general public, and they are the ones who have got to live with inflation and a higher cost of living. And the ones who can afford it least are the ones that are our audience. So it means that they will take out fewer subscriptions to media channels, which means they're reliant more on free advertising media, which can take you into interesting areas. So yes, it is actually an influence on all of these, and that's why I think the audience in the room this morning, the senior audience, actually elevated it from something like number 4 to number 1 during the course of the conversation.
Any questions? We're going to go to a final vote soon to see if any of your minds have been changed. Any questions or observations? We have one here.
I've just got a question in terms of it being an issue that we need to tackle as an industry. How exactly do we as a media industry tackle a cost of living crisis which is mainly being driven by a war that's slightly outside of our control? I'm just curious in terms of what we can actually practically do.
I love the model of control, influence, accept. So you can't do anything about the war in Ukraine. You just have to accept that. You can't do anything about the energy crisis, but there are things you can influence and things you can control. And I think any organisation, the first thing they can address is their own people's ability to cope with the cost of living crisis. And I think there should be targeted, whether they're one-off payments, for instance, if you don't want to increase your salary bills in perpetuity, I think you have to address with lump sum payments your staff, particularly middle management and below, so that they are able to get through this cost of living crisis. And I think you need to encourage people to come into your workplaces, so you pay for the heating and they're all not heating their own homes separately, which also is a stupid thing to do. Why are we heating millions and millions of units of homes when people could come into the office? We've got to really think through what you can control, which is your own staff base, and how you can help them get through this next 3 years.
I just relay an observation we had in the senior leaders debate this morning by the two media owners who were on the panel, which was Z Entertainment and Roku, where they made the point very well, actually, that we've actually in the last few years we've accepted this if I can be reductive, iOS versus Android world, where the more affluent of us are happy to kind of not have ad experience because we pay subscriptions, versus ad-funded environments where you get your media for free, but maybe the ad experience isn't of the highest quality. And actually, now that we're moving to a high inflation, high cost of living environment, it's actually restated the case for why free, or at least cheap, easy to access media has never been more important. Because it's fine if you can afford an FT subscription, an economy subscription, you get all this wonderful high quality stuff at a cost, but that's not available to everyone. I wonder if there's more that we could be arguing for in media where we make to allow for people who can't afford media, whether there's exceptions that can be made. What the chap from Z Entertainment suggested, maybe there's a loosening of regulation that should be happening to allow for more collaboration between media owners and brands, which was an interesting idea. So I think there are some interesting areas in terms of what we can specifically champion beyond, this might end, the war in Ukraine will hopefully end before too long. We won't have such high gas prices, but in the long term, maybe there are things we should be thinking about in terms of free media versus costly media. And we're out of time, so we've got to vote. Time to vote.
Interesting.
In case you don't know who we are, that's who we are. We're going to vote one more time. Now, remember, we're going to put through trust in media already. So based on everything you've heard, what do you think it should be? Cost of living / inflation, talent crisis, sustainability, diversity and inclusion. And you're going to deliberately make it a tie to make it difficult, aren't you? We need to put through 2 out of these 4. Talent crisis looks like an overwhelming winner. Very interesting. Oh.
So exciting.
Oh.
It's like a race.
Don't just vote for the other one to make it close. Vote with your hearts and your heads, not your cheek. Okay, all right. So clearly diversity and inclusion, I think we're going to have to eliminate that one. And I think it's actually pretty close between cost of living, inflation and sustainability.
I think the caveat, though, is that in the first group this morning, we said that diversity and inclusion and the talent crisis are inextricably linked, and therefore we shouldn't see them as separate things. So, they're pretty closely connected.
Should we vote? I'm going to have a show of hands now. Should we have a runoff between cost of living, inflation or sustainability, or should we put them both through? Who thinks we should put them both through? Who wants a runoff? Can we do that? Can we do that? Get people to vote again?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Do it on the same thing, so just reallocate your vote. If you go on Slido and just reallocate it.
Do I need to do anything?
No.
So you just don't vote for diversity and inclusion. Vote for
Or talent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you voted for D&I, please reallocate your vote.
So Omar, if you tell everyone to edit their response, you then go back to normal, and what we vote in between, is it sustainability and cost of living? Cost of living.
Ooh.
Sustain. You're doing this on purpose, I know you.
That's close.
I think that's
I
awfully
agree.
close.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Right. So the result is trust in media, which we already put through, talent crisis, and sustainability. So we're throwing out cost of living. No. Yeah. Okay. There you are. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to this panel. Quick word. Happy with that?
Very happy with that. It's very, very convenient just to throw out cost of living. I'm feeling much better already. Don't have to worry about that one anymore.
Well done, everyone. Thank you very much. This is fascinating, and thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed it. Any closing remarks, Steve, before we wrap up?
Yes. I'll just grab the clicker as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you to the panel. Thank you to everyone here. We tried something really different this year, and hopefully everyone's found it really successful. We've piled a whole load of work now onto Omar and his team, so good luck with that, Omar. You have lots of support though with us, and we'll also be asking for everyone to contribute to that over the next 12 months. It's an industry thing, so we want to make sure it's collaboration, as we were talking about in one of the last sessions if you were there. There I am again. Just a quick reminder on tomorrow. There is a breakfast briefing 8:40 a.m. tomorrow for anyone who is turning up for that, would like to turn up for that. The actual sessions here, though, will start around about 9:30 if you want to come in. Check the agenda just in case I've got that horribly wrong, but I think that's right. We've got a new thing tomorrow called the Media Leaders University. 2 modules in here. One is the future of news. The other one is around video, so please check that out on the agenda as well. They are accessible to everyone. We've got our headliners. Carolyn McCall, CEO at ViTV. We're hopeful we've got Jill Scott, although we've just had a text come through to say there is a problem. But we'll make sure that we update everyone on that. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. And the afternoon, sorry? Is she injured? Well, she's retired, so she can't be injured. Maybe she disagrees strongly with what we've come up with, and it goes against her values. In the afternoon, we've got the future of gaming. So you can come along to that event as well. It is a separate conference, but you're all invited. Big thank you to our partners again. If you're here this morning, you would have heard that, how I talk about our partners for these particular events, particularly Ozone Headline, but all of our partners. They really help with the content, and they certainly help putting this event on as well. So a big thank you to those guys. Please join us for a drink. That's why we put these events on, right, isn't it? So we can network. The drinks will be outside. See you tomorrow.
On behalf of Media Tell Events.